Against the schisms the, against the schism of Melitius the Egyptian, 48 but 68 of the series. There is a party of Melitians in Egypt whose founder was Melitius, a bishop in the Tibet. He belonged to the Catholic Church and was of the Orthodox faith, for his faith did not vary in any way from that of the Holy Catholic Church. Melitius was a contemporary hierarch, flourished at the same time as he became his successor. He was also a contemporary of Saint Peter, the Bishop of Alexandria, and of this life and all this lived during the persecution in the reign of Diocletian and Maximian. The affair of Melitius took place as follows. He instigated a schism, but in no sense by an alteration of the faith. He was arrested during the persecution with the holy bishop and martyr, Peter, and the other martyrs, by the officials the emperor had assigned to the task, the governors of Alexandria and Egypt at the time. Culcianus was prefect of the Tibet, and Heracles prefect of Alexandria. Melitius too was confined in the prison. He and the martyrs were spoke of with Peter the Archbishop of Alexandria. Indeed, Melitius himself was held to be the first of the bishops of Egypt and second to Peter in the archiepiscopate, in order to assist him, but he was under him and referred ecclesiastical matters to him. For it is the custom of the Archbishop in Alexandria to have the ecclesiastical administration of all Egypt and the Tibet, Mareotis, Libya, Ammon, Marmarica, and Pentapolis. Now, all these had been arrested and were in prison awaiting martyrdom and had remained in confinement for some time. Others, who had been condemned before them while martyred, received their reward, and variously these as eminent and more important prisoners were being kept for later. And since some had been martyred and others had missed martyrdom and committed the enormity of the idol worship, those who had even been forced to partake of sacrifices since they had fallen away and had offered sacrifice and committed in the transgression, approached the confessors and martyrs to obtain the mercy of penance. Some were soldiers, but others were clergy of various ranks, the presbyteriate, the diaconate, and others. There was a disturbance over this among the martyrs, and no little trouble, for some said the persons who had once fallen away denied the faith and failed and to maintain their courage or take part in the contest should not be allowed penance. Otherwise, the ones who were still left would have less regard for the penalty and would be misled because of the forgiveness so speedily accorded the others, and come to denial of God and enormity of paganism. In the thing that was led by the confessors themselves was reasonable. Those who said this were Melitius, the Impelius, and more of the other martyrs and confessors with them. And since they had shown the zeal of God, they obviously convinced many by saying it. They also went on to say, if penance should be granted them after some time when the persecution is over, when peace has been restored, provided that they truly repent and show the fruit of repentance, it certainly should not mean that even be taken back in his own order. They may be received into the church and its communion after an interval, but into the order of laity, not as clergy. And this showed respect for the truth and was full of zeal. But the most holy Peter, a kindly man and like a father of all, begged and pleaded, let us receive them and set them at penance if they repent, so that they will hold by the church, and let us not turn them out of their office either. Also I have been told, otherwise they will be disgraced, and those who from cowardice and weakness were once shaken and undermined by the devil will be perverted entirely because of the delay and not healed at all. As the scripture says, let that which is lame not be turned out of the way, but let it rather be healed. And Peter's argument was on the side of mercy and kindness, and that of Melitius and his supporters on the side of truth and zeal. Then and there the schism started up in the form of the seemingly godly proposals of both parties, with some saying one thing, some the other. When Peter, their bishop, saw that Melitius' party withstood his kindliness and were carried to extremes by their zeal for God, he himself hung a curtain in the middle of the prison by spreading out an hymation, that is, a cloak of pallium, and proclaimed to Herodian, let those who are of my opinion come here to me, and let those who are of Melitius to Melitius. And the majority of bishops, presbyters, and other sides by Melitius, but a very few bishops and few others went with Peter, the archbishop. And after that, the one group prayed by itself, and the other by itself, and in the same way, each held its other service separately. Peter's martyrdom came, and the blessed man was perfected, leaving Alexander as his successor in Alexandria, for he succeeded to the throne after Peter. But Melitius and many others were sentenced to exile and banished to the mines of Penon. And at this time, and at this time, at the time where at that at the time those who were dragged off because of being confessors went into schism of Melitius. Melitius himself, in prison and on his journey as he passed through Evangelion area, ordained clergy, bishops, presbyters, and deacons, and founded his own churches. And the first group would not communicate with the second, nor the second with the first, but each put a sign on its own church. Those who led the existing all churches in succession from Peter labeled the Catholic Church. Melitius' succession labeled the Church of the Martyrs. And some Melitius ordained many clergy in this way at Eleftheropolis, Gaza, and Elia on his arrival. Melitius served further time in the mines. Afterwards, however, the confessors were released from the mines, those of Peter's party, for there were still many, and those of Melitius, for they did not communicate or pray with each other even in the mines. But if was given Melitius to live in the world for a while longer, so that he flourished at the same time as Peter's successor, Alexander, and was on good terms with him, and he was anxious over the state of the church of the faith, for I have frequently said that he had no divergent beliefs. For after he had come to Alexandria and spent some time there, holding his own assemblies with his own people, Melitius himself detected Arius, and as it was rumored that Arius, in his expositions, had gone beyond the prescribed bounds of the faith, he brought him to Alexander. Arius was a presbyter at the church in Alexandria, which is called Baucalis. There was one presbyter assigned to a church, for there were many churches, but now there are more, and the church was entrusted to him, even there was another presbyter with him. When I need to, I shall speak of these things in detail at the proper place. Since Alexander had zealously detected Arius, he summoned bishops, called a council, and examined him, and inquiring about his faith, and demanding an accounting from Arius for the corruption of the heresy which had infected him. And Arius denied nothing, but indeed brazenly replied that it was so. And Alexander excommunicated him, and with him there were excommunicated large number the virgins and other clergy who had been polluted by him. Arius fled and made his way to Palestine, but when he reached Nicomedia and and from there wrote letters to Alexander. He did not abandon the insane spirit of heresy. A little later, however, when Alexander, the holy bishop in Alexandria, had taken pains to arouse the blessed confessor Constantine got a council in the city of Nicaea, and Arius' sect was anathematized. But after Alexander died, Arius wished to receive back into the church, for he first denied his heresy before the blessed Emperor Constantine, and pretendedly professed the orthodox formularies under oath. But the emperor said to him, if you are swearing with full sincerity, may your oath be confirmed and your guiltless. But if you are swearing guiltfully, may God by whom you have sworn take the vengeance on you. And this happened to him not long afterwards, and I shall say later. In connivance with Eusebius, the bishop of Nicomedia, who had the same beliefs as him, Arius was presented the same emperor as having supposedly denied and condemned his heresy. And so Constantine directed and permitted Eusebius to receive Arius in the church at Constantinople in the presence of the bishop Alexander, which had the same name as the bishop of Alexandria, but was the bishop of Constantinople. But now, after the death of the confessor Melitius, Alexander of the blessed memory of Alexandria renewed his anger against the schism in the church and decided to offer every kind of harassment and hindrance to those who assembled by themselves and whom Melitius had left behind him, and forcibly prevent them from rebelling against the one church. But they were unwilling and caused trouble and disturbances. And then, because of their oppression and restraint by the blessed Alexander, certain of them who were the foremost and preeminent for the Pythian life undertook the journey to court with a petition to request the privilege of assembling by themselves without hindrance. Those who did so were an important man named Paphnutius, and Anchorid, who was himself the son of female confessor and had nearly been a confessor himself on a number of occasions. One of the bishops, John, was a highly respected man, and the bishop in Pelusium, Callinicus, and certain others. But when they went with their petition for the emperor, they were turned away and rebuffed. For when the court officials heard the name Melitians and did not know what that might be, they would not let them petition the emperor. During this affair, Paphnutius, John, and the others had occasion to spend some time in Constantinople and Nicomedia. They became friends at this time with the bishop of Nicomedia. Eusebius told him their story. They knew he had access to the emperor Constantine and asked for his introduction to the emperor. But after promising to present them to the emperor and do what they asked, he made this request of them, that they receive Arius, who was firstly refrained repentance, into communion with them. They promised him, and then Eusebius brought them to the emperor and explained their situation to him, and the emperor granted the Melitians permission to assemble them by themselves from them on without disturbance for anyone. If only these Melitians, who had received the absolutely correct form the truth, had communicated with the plebiscites after penance instead of with Arius and his followers, there has been the proverbial fate of leaving the smoke to fall into the fire. Arius could not have gained a foothold at first except through this business, which has become an evil alliance with them even now. For the Melitians, who were Simon pure and absolutely correct in their faith, have gotten mixed in among the disciples of Arius, and by now most of them have been divided by Arius' heresy and been turned away from the faith in our time. Even though some have continued to hold the true faith, they hold it, but because of the communion with Arius and Arians, and by no means out of the slimy muck. But a little later, for as I promised to tell the whole business, I shall repeat it here. Alexander the Bishop of Constantinople was compelled to receive Arius, although he prayed, groaned, and knelt before the altar about the dead hour of the Sabbath. And Eusebius said, "If you won't receive him willingly yourself, he'll enter the church with me against your will tomorrow." And the Lord's day was dawning. But as I said, after Alexander had prayed and besought our Lord either to take him away so that he would not be defiled with the blasphemy of the Lord, Arius, or else to work a wonder, as he does in every generation, the holy man's prayer was answered with the small delay. That night Arius went to the privy to relieve himself, and like Judas once burst, and thus his end came in a full unclean place. Then, after this, the plots against the church were hatched by Arius' disciples. Alexander of Alexandria died after the Council of Nicaea, but Athanasius was not there, i.e. in Alexandria. After Alexander's death, he was a deacon under Alexander at the time and had been sent to court by him. Although Alexander had given orders that no one but Athanasius be consecrated bishop, as he himself and the clergy testified, and the whole church, the Melitius seized the opportunity, and since there was no bishop in Alexandria, Athanasius has never had two bishops like the other cities. They consecrated a man named Theonas as bishop of Egypt in Alexander Place, and 3 months later he died. Not long after Theonas' death, Athanasius arrived, and a council of Orthodox bishops was summoned for all characters. And thus Athanasius' consecration took place, and the throne was given to him, the man who was worthy of it, and from it heaven prepared, in accordance with God's will and the testimony and command of the blessed Alexander. And then Athanasius began to be distressed and saddened by the church division between the Melitians and the Catholic Church. He pleaded with them, exhorted them, and they would not listen. He pressed and asked them, and they would not obey. Now, Athanasius often visited the church nearby, particularly the ones in Mareotis. And once, when the Melitians were holding the service, a deacon, together with some laity, came rushing out of the court that was with Alexander and broke a lamp. As the story goes, and fight broke out. And this was the beginning of intrigue against Athanasius, for the Melitians brought charges and false accusations against him, and misinterpreted and misrepresented the facts, with the Arians lending the assistance to this plot because of the envy of God's holy faith of Orthodoxy. And they communicated with Emperor Constantine. But Eusebius, who, as I said, was the bishop of Nicomedia, was flunky to the whole gang, and the one who plotted the injury to the church and Pope Athanasius. So that the accusers went to the emperor and said the implement which some, as I told you, said was a touch, was a vessel were the mysteries, and they made certain other accusations. They claimed that presbyter in Mareotis named Arsenius had been struck, and that his hand had been cut off with a sword, either by Athanasius' people or by Athanasius himself. They even brought a hand to cut and display it. It was in a box. On hearing this, the emperor were angry. The blessed Constantine had a zeal for God. He had no idea that there were false accusers because of the Arians' anger against orthodoxy, which we have mentioned, and he commanded that a council be convened in Phoenicia in the city of Tyre, Here the Eusebius of Caesarea certain others to sit as judges. If anything, however, they had a certain learning towards the Arians Vulgate, and the bishops of the Catholic Church of Egypt were summoned who were under Athanasius eminent, distinguished men with illustrious lives in God. Among them was the blessed Potamot the Great, the bishop of Heracleopolis, and a confessor. And the Melitians were summoned as well, especially Athanasius' accusers. The blessed Potamon was a zealot for truth and orthodoxy, a free-spoken man who had spoken sound partiality. His eye had been put out for the truth during the persecution. When he saw Eusebius sitting on the judge's bench and Athanasius standing, he was overcome with grief and wept, as honest men will, and shouted at Eusebius, "And are you seated, Eusebius, with Athanasius before you in the dock, where he is innocent? How can you put up this thing like that? Tell me, weren't you in prison with me during the persecution? I lost an eye for the truth, but you don't appear to be maimed and weren't martyred. You stand here alive without a mark on you. How did you get out of jail if you didn't promise our persecutors to do the unthinkable, or if you didn't do it?" On hearing this, Eusebius was roused to indignation. He rose and dismissed the court, saying, "If you've come here and answered me like that, your accusers are telling the truth. If you're playing the tyrant here, you'd much better go on home." Then Eusebius and his fellow judges undertook to send two Pannonian bishops with Arian views, Ursaces and Valens, to Alexandria and Mareotis. When they said these things had happened, the affair of the vessel and the other circumstances of the fight. But although they went, they did not bring back anything too, but made up one perjury after another, and brought false charges against the blessed Pope Athanasius. And, fabricating them in writing as truth, they took them and referred them to the council of Eusebius and the others. Eustachius and Valens revealed this letter by repenting, approaching the blessed Julius, the bishop of Rome, with a petition desiring an admission of the fault. "We have accused Pope Athanasius falsely, but receive us into communion and penance." And they sent the confirmations of this, written in repentance, to Athanasius himself at Tyre. Pope Athanasius, seeing that the plot he was faced with was in all respects a serious one, fled by night before his trial and confrontation with the false charges, came to Constantine at court and gave him his side, the story with an explanation. Constantine was still aggrieved, however, and remained angry because he thought that the accusers might well be telling the truth and accused offering a false defense. But in spite of his anger, Pope Athanasius sternly told the emperor, "God will judge between you and me, just as surely as you are in agreement with the traditions of my poor self." And then he was condemned to exile because of what the council had written the emperor, for they deposed Athanasius in absentia, and because of which the emperor was displeased, being angry with Athanasius, and he lived in Italy for more than 12 or 14 years. Later it was widely reported to Arsenius, whom the traducers had originally reported as dead, and whose head was said to be cut off, had been found in Arabia, and that Athanasius had actually made himself known to Athanasius in exile, and Pope Athanasius sent for him secretly, as I have been told. When Arsenius had come in person to bless Athanasius himself, they came together to Constantine's sons, Constans and Constantius. Athanasius exhibited Arsenius alive with 2 hands, and it became clear that his accusers were guilty not only of slander but of grave robbing because of the dead hand they used to carry around, and this made the whole thing ridiculous, and there was astonishment at such publication and so much of it, and no one had any idea of what to say to the accusers, the accused, and all the other things, which will take a great deal of time if I choose to tell even part of them. But Constantine died, and Pope Athanasius had become very much at home, esteemed and welcome at Rome and all over Italy, and while the emperor himself and his sons Constans and Constantius, after the death of Constantine the Great, he was sent to Alexandria by the two emperors, although Constantius was at Antioch and gave his consent to his representatives, and by a letter to Alexandria, as I know from the 3 emperors' letters to Alexandrians, and to Pope Athanasius himself. And once again he occupied this throne after his successor Gregory, who had been sent by the Arians while Athanasius was in exile. But he was again intrigued against to Constantius by Stephen and expelled. And after that he was intrigued against once more by the Eunuch Leontius and his supporters. He incurred banishment then and another recall. For George was sent to Alexandria by Constantius, and Athanasius withdrew and went to hiding for a while until George was killed, at which time Julian came to the throne, and after Constantius' death referred to Hellenism. For the Alexandrians has nourished at anger at George, and they killed him, burned his body, reduced it to ashes, and scattered it to the winds. But after Julian had died in Persia, and the blessed Jovian had succeeded to the empire, he wrote to the Bishop Athanasius with great honor and a memorable letter, and he sent for him, embraced him, and sent him to his own throne, and the Holy Church had received its bishop back, and was comforted for a short while. After Jovian's death, the blessed Athanasius once more assailed by the same persecutions, defamations, and disturbances. He was not, indeed, driven from the church and his throne. The Alexandrians had sent an embassy of his behalf, and the entire city had demanded him after Lucius, who is bishop now, had been consecrated abroad as the Arian bishop of Alexandria. It is like that at Antioch a number of times he had urged the Emperor Valens that he be sent to the throne of Alexandria, but the Emperor, who was unwilling to expel Athanasius for fear of a disturbance among the people, had not heeded him. Indeed, Lucius was finally sent when Pope Athanasius died, and did much harm to church and city, to the laity, bishops, and clergy who had been under Athanasius and had received him in every church, and to Peter, who had been consecrated as Athanasius' successor in Alexandria. This is still the situation. Some have been exiled, bishops, presbyters, and deacons. Others have been subjected to capital punishment in Alexandria, and others sent to the arena, and virgins have been killed, and many others are perishing. God's church is still in this plight because of the affair of Melitians and Arians, who have used means of this sort to gain their foothold, and the opportunity for the same heretical gang, I mean the gang of Arians, to win out. I shall discuss all this in detail in my refutation of Arius, but I shall repass this subject by as well and go on to the Arian sect itself, calling on God for aid as I approach this willful, many-beheaded serpent to battle with it.